Hi, and welcome to R&R Living Life. In this episode, Rick and I enjoy Lake Ballard before returning to Menzies, and there our journey takes us along the Golden Highway to Gwalia and then Leanora, where we stay overnight, before continuing on via the Leanora-Laverton Road to Laverton. Lake Ballard, just over 50 kilometres northeast of Menzies, via the Menzies Sandstone Road, was a stunning experience, though the flies were horrendous. In 2003, the esteemed English sculptor and artist Anthony Gormley created a unique artistic work of art, the largest outdoor art gallery on earth at Lake Ballard, where he positioned across the enormous expanse of this dry salt lake 51 human-like sculptures that stand motionless on the white shimmering surface. As the afternoon sun lowered in the sky, we strolled out onto the lake for what was to become another incredible experience. We could see where it had been wet the previous couple of days by the muddy footprints and slippery steps, but thankfully the surface was only tacky in a few places, which we dodged and did return to Gidget without mud on our shoes. Inside Australia consists of 51 uniquely digitally scanned naked body sculptures. Gormley manipulated the scans, transforming each body into what he terms an insider, a stick figure form the same height as its original body, but only 2/3 its mass, accentuating the subtleties of posture built up over years of inhabiting the body. He then made them into sand moulds and individually cast in black chromium steel, resulting in the figures we saw on the lake. Most of the sculptures represent people who lived in Menzies. He then placed the sculptures on the Lake Ballard salt pan, which is around 10 square kilometres, though I am not sure if they are in any particular position, as I have been unable to find any maps of their positions. They range in distance from around 500 metres apart and face various directions. Rick and I saw sculptures of men, women and teenage figures, but didn't get to see them all, as it would have taken us most of the day to explore the whole area of the lake that they stretched across. Rick climbed the hill to view the sculptures as they disappeared into the distance. Most that we could see were connected by the footprints in the mud from previous visitors. The lake itself felt quite eerie, with mirages shimmering in the distance, while out of the mirages these shadowy sculptures appeared, dotted across the landscape. We were intrigued by the fence line that the salt had claimed that stretched across the lake from one of the small hills we climbed. Later that afternoon we sat and watched the sun set over the lake. What an amazing scene, especially as the sculptures closer to the small hill disappeared into the night. The colours were spectacular. I found it captivating and wished I could paint. It was intriguing to see the changes in the colours as the sun set, and the moon as it rose higher in the sky. It really was a magical place. Thankfully, by nightfall the flies had given up, but the little insects thought it was a great time to invade, so we sat in the dark and enjoyed the evening. The following morning we again witnessed another stunning sunrise. Maybe it is that I am not usually out of bed early enough to see the sunrise, but on this trip we have certainly seen more than our fair share of impressive sunrises. In this clear, uninterrupted sky, even with a few wisps of clouds, it made for another positive and relaxed start to the day. It was so gratifying and good for the soul. Western Australia has been so vastly different to Eastern Australia that I have found lots to be interested and amazed by. The huge salt pans at Lake Ballard is just one example of this amazing state. The huge number of mines has astonished me. To think that so much of Western Australia is under mining lease with the majority in overseas hands is unbelievable. There is so much history, amazing natural landscapes, stunning scenery, and the remoteness and isolation that seems to draw both Rick and I further into this amazing part of Western Australia. Just the land alone is fascinating, seeing how others work the land, make improvements and adapt to the environment. It may have taken pastoralists and mining companies a long time to realise the damage they were doing, but the progress that they are now making to improve and rectify that damage is commendable. I have found it enjoyable learning about this part of Australia, especially the explorers who I had heard nothing about. I knew about Burke and Wills, Charles Sturt, Ludwig Leichhardt, and had been to many of the places in Queensland and New South Wales where they had once explored. But here in Western Australia I have had very little knowledge of John Forrest, Ernest Giles, who I did know about, David Carnegie, Gus Luck, and Frank Harm, just to name a few. Not to forget all those French and Dutch explorers who traversed the coastline before Europeans landed on the east coast, and the indigenous history and culture. To see the exhibitions that exhibit and record the achievement of these brave exploits into the harsh outback, and how they opened up the country for pastoralists, prospectors and mining companies has been incredible. The indigenous people who helped and worked alongside some of these people is remarkable. After breakfast, we left Lake Ballard and made our way back to Menzies before continuing on the Goldfield Highway. About 30 kilometres from Menzies, we crossed a low-lying strip of roadway that connects Lake Ballard and Lake Marmon, where the lakes are about 15 kilometres apart. We were travelling through a mulga environment that supported many other smaller ephemeral saline lakes. Both Lake Ballard and Lake Marmon are inundated on average about once every 5 years following major rainfall events, receiving water from direct precipitation and periodic flows from a number of creeks, with water remaining in the lakes for about 6 to 9 months after major rainfall. Not far out of Menzies, we passed a couple of pushbike riders heading east. As we crested the top of the next hill, I wondered how they had the stamina and drive to pedal such long, undulating stretches of road, not to mention the hill climbs. Earlier on in our travels in South Australia, we had passed a Canadian gentleman who was riding along the Eyre Peninsula, and he told us that he did a 6-week trek like the one he was doing each year for his holidays. As we made our way into Western Australia, we again passed another fellow pedalling across the Nullarbor, into a headwind at the time. I take my hat off to them. Madness, I wonder, or is it just the enjoyment of the freedom and the sense of adventure, or the challenge it gives you to have to rely on yourself to get you through? I am just happy to sit in our air-conditioned boat, travelling each day and being able to be comfortable each night in Gidget. But then I may be just soft. Along the way we passed Medusa's Frog, a rock painted green on the side of the highway, the turn-off to Jedamiah Airstrip and the Ulysses Mine. About 45 kilometres from Leanora we passed Lake Rayside, another large expanse of mostly dry salt lakes alongside the road, with an elevated causeway highlighting the amount of water that sometimes flows after rain. Lake Rayside was popular with the early explorers and prospectors. The salt lake is known for kektites, large gravel-sized bodies composed of black, green, brown or grey natural glass, formed from terrestrial debris ejected during meteorite impacts. Scientists believe that they were formed after a large asteroid or comet struck Indochina 0.8 million years ago that flung material up into the atmosphere, forming unique shapes as they melted when re-entering and landing in Australia. With Leanora in sight, we stopped just 4 kilometres short to check out Gwalia, once a thriving gold rush mining town that has been deserted since 1963. Our first stop was to check out the former State Hotel, a 2-storey building in Federation filigree style, a combination of solid classic details with delicate decorative timber elements, typical of the traditional Australian pub at the turn of the century, located on the corner of Cane and Station Streets. In 1903, the then state government took the unusual steps to provide a controlled hotel facility with strict rules and regulations for the miners of Gwalia by building the State Hotel, to provide it with a licensed premises to lessen the sly grog trade that was happening between Gwalia and Leanora. On the hill in the mine precinct was the Gwalia Historical Museum that features the mine manager's house, now Hoover House Bed and Breakfast, the arrays office, the main shed and various original buildings from the mine that took us back to those heady days of the late 1800s, along with many fascinating outdoor exhibits including the head frame and winder, one of 3 steam engines that worked on the wood lines, rail lines to timber cutting settlements, supplying the mine with timber and fuel, and various displays of life on the goldfields. Inside the arrays office, we checked out the collection from the old Sons of Gwalia mine and Leanora district. In 1896, 3 Coolgardie prospectors discovered a rich gold reef near Mount Leanora, a small rocky hillock in the vast Western Australia hinterland, about 230 kilometres north of the booming gold towns of Kalgoorlie and Boulder. The Sons of Gwalia mine opened the following year, surrounded by a growing miners' settlement of tents and rough shanties built of corrugated iron, timber and canvas. In 1897, the syndicate sold the lease to George W. Hall, and the Sons of Gwalia was established. Hall erected a second-hand 10-stamp battery and employed 110 men to work the mine. The London and Western Australian Exploration Company sent 23-year-old Herbert Hoover, an American geologist and mining engineer, to inspect the Sons of Gwalia mine, with Hoover recognising its potential, and in November 1897 the company purchased the mine. On his appointment as manager, Hoover implemented radical changes to cut costs. In his 6 months as mine manager, Hoover designed the mine manager's house and oversaw the design of the staff and office buildings, all to be constructed on the hill overlooking the mine and the growing town site where the workers lived, before being transferred to China in November 1898, with the majority of the buildings not completed. Herbert Hoover was later elected the 31st President of the United States of America, serving from the 4th of March 1929 to 4th of March 1933. We wandered Hoover House, a typical home showcasing the style of homes for senior mine management in the late 19th and early 20th century. The building has been completely renovated and today consists of 3 magnificent bedrooms, opulently decorated in period style, the grand dining room where mining deals were once negotiated, and the tranquil views over the spectacular goldfields landscape from the sweeping veranda and the wide green front lawn overlooking the working open gold mine. We enjoyed a late morning tea in the peaceful ambience on the back veranda overlooking Mount Leanora. Not only did we explore the Hoover House, we also took time to enjoy the huge collection of objects that also featured the heritage of Afghan, Italian and Yugoslav migrants, telling the stories of hardship in a remote mining community and the ingenuity of its inhabitants to make do with what was available in order to survive. We read about the people associated with the books, textiles, photographs, artwork, machinery, equipment, furniture, and mining technology on display throughout the buildings and structures on the site. We spent over half a day wandering the heritage precinct. From Gwalia we made our way to Leanora, a gold mining town that is a fascinating desert service centre for the surrounding pastoral stations and the mining and mineral exploration industries that grew from the resourcefulness of those early gold prospectors and miners and the tenacity of pastoralists. The first Europeans to explore the region were John Forrest and his party in 1869, who named the hill in the area Mount Leanora. In 1894 prospectors came seeking gold, and in March 1896 the first lease in the Mount Leanora area was pegged, with a small settlement of hessian and timber shacks constructed. Soon after, settlers called for a town site, and the town site declared in April 1898, but it wasn't until August 1900 when the town was formally gazetted and established. From the earliest days there was considerable competition between the towns of Gwalia and Leanora, with the government of the day refusing to gazette a town site at Gwalia, arguing that a replication of services at Leanora was unnecessary. We wandered Tower Street, where the historic charm has remained largely unchanged since the turn of the century. The shops, with their footpath verandas, and the turn-of-the-century hotels have remained relatively unchanged by the boom and bust years of the gold mining that drives the town's economy. After a very restful night we made our way to Laverton, an outback mining town on the edge of the great Victorian desert. This small settlement has had a checkered career as a gold and nickel mining town, and once had the reputation as being the wildest town in the West. The area is said to be inhospitable land on the western edge of the great Victorian desert. That is marginal desert country with an average rainfall of only 220 millimetres. Alice Springs is 1,660 kilometres to the east, while Perth is just over 950 kilometres to the southwest, a long way from anywhere. There were quite a few interesting things to see around Laverton, like the bronze statue of Dr. Charles Lavers, who gave his name to the town that was once called British Flag, the historic police complex comprising a jail that was particularly primitive and would be appalling in summer, the police station and the sergeant's quarters, and the information centre with a huge amount of local and indigenous history, where we enjoyed a coffee. After wandering the town we made our way back to Gidget for a quiet afternoon and to make ready for the next leg of our journey. Thank you for watching this episode. I hope you have enjoyed it. Give us a thumbs up if you did. Join us next time as we begin our journey along the Great Central Road. Take care and stay safe. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R Living Life.